Happy Father's Day. Sorry, Dad, I think I totally messed up on that perfect cup of coffee thing. I wasn't paying attention that day, because I still haven't acquired that taste. So, a couple of quick things, I guess, before I really get started. I love being a father. Probably more than just about anything else I can think of. I enjoy being a father. And I'm not going to go too far into that because two of my kids are in here, and I can feel them rolling their eyes already. So, having said that, preaching on Father's Day, specifically, I suppose, on this Father's Day today, I probably will get a little choked up a few times here and there during the course of this message, partially because my mom and dad are here, partially because some of my former students I haven't seen in a long time. Really enjoy them. And Derek, when I heard him call you Dad out there in the hall, I almost lost it. Being a father is incredible. As a dad, you know, you wear a lot of hats. And so I started thinking about hats as I'm getting ready to talk about this. And the first hat I thought about was a baseball hat. And I want you to notice underneath that baseball hat how nicely curved that wave goes. I don't know what happened to it, but yeah, that was me in my baseball hat. And I learned a lot underneath my baseball hat. I learned that nobody's perfect. I could strike out all the time, although I had a pretty small strike zone, I gotta say, so I got a lot of walks. Okay. But I remember my favorite hit, I was tired of getting walked, and so this pitch came in, I literally left my feet to try to reach it. It didn't go out of the park, but I was fast enough that by the time it got to the fence, I was rounding second base, and I made it home before the throw. I shouldn't have swung at that, but nobody's perfect. That's what I told my coach anyway. What are you doing? I'm tired of walking, coach. We learn a lot. You know, nobody's perfect. You keep trying. These are things I learned in baseball. We have a graduation hat. You guys have seen these pretty recently. Some of you recently graduated. We learned a lot underneath kind of the symbol of that graduation cap. Mainly I learned not to stop learning. See, because when you graduate, you're not done. Some of you, it's been like about a month almost since you graduated. It doesn't seem like that long ago, does it? And you thought maybe you're done. Never stop learning. That's what I learned underneath my graduation cap. I have a couple other hats that I want to make sure I share with you. This is my CIY hat. I got this at CIY. I don't know if you can read it in the back or not, but it says CIY. I love going to CIY. I love taking students to CIY. I never got to go as a kid, didn't really know anything about it, but during my first weekend ministry while I was in college, CIY was a regular part of their summer, and so they had this summer conference that they went to, and Mike, will you drive the van? Sure, I'll drive the van. That sounds fun. So we loaded into this junky church van. And I know we don't have these kinds of vans here. Our vans run pretty well, thanks to Jim, who, just a side note here, Jim Miller, that was introduced as the chairman of the elders, he's also the chairman of keeping our vans running. He's the guy that cleans the toilets around here. And I love that bit of leadership here at WestWay. It's not about being in charge and telling other people what to do. It's about serving, humbly. Okay, back into the hat mode. CIY, we get in this junky van, we head down, we have a little bit of issues, like no air conditioning, in the middle of summer in Missouri. It was horrible. So we get there to the conference, have a great week at the conference, we load up, we start heading back up to Huron, South Dakota, and we blew a tire on the van, which we had been, it was a rental, actually we blew a tire on the trailer first. It was a rental trailer, and they assured us that there was a spare in there, so we unpack everything. There's no spare in there. So we're stuck on the side of the road with the trailer with no tire. We have to make it to the next town. I leave the kids with the trailer, we get a tire, we get back, we put it on, we get down the road. An hour later, we blew a tire on the van. So that one we have spare for, we get it changed, we make it up the road. We got to Omaha and we thought, you know what, the way this is going, we just need a break. We stopped at Walmart, I got a new tire to replace the spare, let the kids wander a little bit, and then we got loaded back up and we take off. We got about an hour north of Omaha and it started overheating. It was horrible. We got it cooled down, got going again. We got to Sioux Falls and the transmission just dumped everything. I stopped at a stoplight and I just heard splash. And I saw the gauge go. And I said, we're done. Pulled into the grocery store that was nearby and we stopped. That was my first CIY experience. Despite that, I love CIY because I've seen in CIY, I've learned it's a week where all the pieces come together for the students and for the leaders that are there. All the things that we've been talking about all year long in our ministry, it's like a puzzle just coming into shape and people see the big picture. It's awesome, I love it. I would love for you to help us go. You've seen outside there, we're raising money in a few different ways. My daughter set up a bake sale out there. We've got the envelopes out there. Actually, I got to brag for a minute because I'm a dad, and I can do that, I think. At least I have the microphone, so if I can remember where I put this thing. This is one of the envelopes that was taken last week. And I know nobody's perfect, remember the baseball lesson. But I know that I've done something right as a dad when my 12-year-old boy comes to me and says, can I take one of the envelopes? Yeah. He doesn't have a job, obviously. He doesn't get allowance. His money, whatever he has, is that he's gotten for a birthday or Christmas or he's hung on to from odd jobs that he's done. And so I expect him to grab like $1, grab the envelope with a 2 on it, because we can do that. He grabs $15. And I said, are you sure that's the one you want? Yeah? Go for it. My 12-year-old, giving up the money that he's been saving, probably for a video game, right? So that his big sister can go to CIY. He didn't put it that way, but I know that's why. Okay, I'll make sure that $15 goes to somebody else. I know this is a horrible commercial, but I really do love CIY, and I appreciate all the help that you guys have already given for our group to be able to go. It's a great experience for our students. It really does, like Shane mentioned earlier, it transforms lives. By far, the single best thing that I have seen done in student ministry as far as events go has been the CIY Summit Conference, which they now don't call that, they call it CIY Move. So that's the CIY hat. And I promise I didn't just say that because I want to ask you for money. It really is about the pieces coming together and people seeing the big picture of what our student ministry is all about. I have another hat here. This is from my days in Auburn. I got to coach the soccer team, and they got me this hat. It's Auburn Bulldogs, which I thought was funny when we moved here because we've got the Bulldogs and the red and black. And over there, it's red and black Bulldogs, so I thought that was interesting. But they got me this hat that says coach on the back, and it was a great experience to work in the high school as a coach. And I got to learn a lot. But the biggest thing I think was that I learned to never stop teaching. Never stop helping somebody else learn what you've already learned. See, we were in a small town and not that many people knew a lot about soccer. And so I heard a rumor, the guy that was the head coach called me and he said, hey, I heard that you play soccer. Would you be interested in helping me coach the high school team? Like, yeah. Ask a youth minister if you can give him daily access to the high school students. Yeah, Yeah, I'll take that. And I learned to never stop teaching. It wasn't just about soccer. It was about passing on what I've learned in life to a whole new set of students. One last hat that I want to share with you guys here. It's this hat. And that hat. Yeah, that was me a long time ago. Really long time ago. And that's this hat. Which actually is even older than that picture. I found out this week, I asked my dad if I could borrow this hat. I know it doesn't look right on me, does it? I asked my dad if I could borrow the hat. And he said, yeah, we still have it. It's still around here somewhere. So I got the hat. I'm going to take it off before people take pictures. Just kidding, Dad. That's my dad's hat. And he's had that hat as long as I can remember. And I would never describe my dad necessarily as a cowboy. Although, I suppose if you think about what a cowboy is, that's my dad. But I remember he always had this hat. And he told me this week, yeah, we got that hat for my dad when we were in school. And then when I graduated, he gave it to me. And I think, did you say you gave it to him for Father's Day? That's kind of cool. I didn't realize that. That hat's seen a lot. If you look close, it's got marks on it all over. It's got a few places where the bends don't quite go the way they used to go. The band around here is kind of all frayed and it looks like it's been there for a while. There's some spots on there. It looks like you had a bloody thumb one time or something. Bought at the Russell Saddle Shop in Douglas, Wyoming a long time ago. And I learned a lot. I learned more from that hat than I did from any of the other hats that I've ever worn. Not because I ever wore it, except for maybe for that picture. But it didn't really fit. But that was my dad's hat. I learned a lot from my dad. And it wasn't because he sat down and we had dad-to-son lessons every day. I don't think we had a lot of those. That would have been kind of awkward, probably. But it was because I watched. I watched and I learned. I learned from my dad to always try new things. That was one of the things that I learned. We were on a trip to Oregon one time and he pulled that out because my little brother, my youngest brother, he was really scared of a lot of things. And especially things that were new and uncomfortable and unfamiliar. And so my dad would tell him, well, you should always try new things. You don't know if you like this clam chowder unless you try it. I know I don't like it. No, you don't know until you try it. Okay, fine, I'll try it. Okay, I don't like it. But you try it. You don't know until you try it. So you should always try new things. It was fun to see that flipped around on the way back. We loaded up in Cody, Wyoming into a pickup. There were Luann and I and my parents and my two brothers. So there were 6 of us in an old Dodge pickup that had not like the full extended cab, like you have 4 full doors that you can get in. It had like the little tiny one that you scrunch in. There were 6 of us in there. We had a mattress in the back. Don't do this, it's illegal now. We had a mattress in the back and somebody usually was back in the truck bed on the mattress. We opened the window so they could talk back and forth if they wanted to. But it was a long trip. It was a great trip. We had a blast. But we kind of went from one place to another and camped out at different places. And I remember driving out there, it's like, Luann and I had already driven from eastern Nebraska clear to western Wyoming, and then we had another rest of the drive. It was a long travel few days. And we were tired, everybody was tired, and we kept driving and driving and driving. We stopped someplace and camped and set up. I think it started raining, or maybe it was just dark. It sounds better if it was raining though, doesn't it? So we set up camp, we go. The next day we unload everything, pack it back up, and head to the coast. Spend a few days out there and then we start heading back. And on the way back, we were all pretty much done with the vacation. We were ready to just be home. And we knew that wasn't going to happen in one shot. And so we knew we were going to have to stop somewhere. And with every fiber in our being, I think 5 of the 6 of us, maybe at least 4, did not want to set up tents and camp again. We really wanted to stay at a hotel. And Dad, of course, who was paying for everything, tents are a lot cheaper. Camping spot is a lot cheaper than a hotel room, and so we're driving along and we're just begging, can we please stay at a hotel somewhere? Oh, we'll see. Time will tell. We'll get to that in a minute. And we just kept driving and driving, and we're like, we gotta stop somewhere anyway, so could we stop? And we were driving, I think it was by Green River or Rock Springs, and my little brother, I think he was about 5 or 6, he says, hey Dad, have you ever stopped at that hotel? We're flying down the interstate, and he sees a hotel sign. Dad, have you ever stopped at that hotel? No, never have. Dad, you should always try new things. We stopped at that hotel and we stayed there that night. It was great. I also learned that we should always do what God tells us, no matter what. I probably learned how to take too long telling that last story too. Do what God tells you, no matter what. I saw time and time again in our lives where, Dad, why are we doing this? Because that's what God wants us to do. No matter what, you do it. I learned from my dad that time will tell. That was one of his favorite sayings. Hey Dad, can we do this or that? Well, time will tell. Hey, someday Dad, could we? Time will tell. And you know what time always does? It always tells. Sooner or later, you get to know yes or no, because time will tell. I also learned that anything is possible. I saw my dad change from one job to a different job, to a different job, to a different job, to a different job. It all had nothing to do with each other, except that he was following the lead of God. I saw my dad sell a business in order to go help plant a church, because that's what God wanted him to do. 20 years ago, almost exactly 20 years ago, Luann and I graduated high school, we got married, we spent a couple of weeks on a road trip, honeymoon, setting up tents to camp, whenever I learned that. We finished our honeymoon and we were getting ready to move out to Norfolk to go to Bible college. And we were going to get there early so we could get jobs before all the other college kids show up in town. And so we were packed up, 18 years old, 17 years old, loaded everything that we had, and we headed east. And I remember we didn't even get 15 miles out of town. Luann was already asleep. I was facing a lot of miles, and I had the radio going, and this country song came on that some of you have probably heard. It's called Keep It Between the Lines. And I remember listening to that song, and I lost it. And I'm driving down the road, and tears are just pouring down my face. Because this song is all about a dad teaching his kid how to live life. I'm just going to look over this way, because it says keep it between the lines. It says keep your hands on the wheel. The story's about a dad teaching his kid to drive for the first time. But really that's not what it's about. He says keep your hands on the wheel. Believe in the things that are real. Take your time and keep it between the lines. And I remember hearing that, Father saying that to his son. And I just remember thinking, I'm leaving my dad. How can I do this? Can I do this? And all those lessons kind of came flooding back to me. And I realized I was leaving my dad. I was moving hundreds of miles away from my dad, but I would always be his son. See, living in his house isn't what makes me his son. I'm his son because that's what he calls me. In your Bible, in the book of Luke, in chapter 15, there's a story. And we put the wrong name on this story, I'm convinced. We call it the story of the prodigal son. I always thought the word prodigal meant like someone that ran away or left what they knew was right. We kind of talk about prodigals as being those that grow up in the church and then they leave the church. That's not really what the word prodigal means. The word prodigal means to spend extravagantly, which the son definitely did. That's not really what the story's about. See, because it's paired with a couple other stories. A story of a lost coin and a story of a lost sheep. And as I think about the story of the lost sheep, it's not really about the sheep, is it? It's about the shepherd. The sheep probably didn't even know it was lost. The sheep was probably grazing along, just kind of wandering around. Didn't even know it had food in front of its face. That's all they cared about. Didn't even realize he was lost. The story really is about the good shepherd that goes and finds that one lost sheep. The story of the coin, obviously the coin didn't know it was lost. It just fell in a crack somewhere. The story of the lost coin is about the woman who turned over everything in her house trying to find this coin. And the story of the lost son, I'm convinced, is a lot more about the father than it is about the son. See, because it's all about how the father waits. And he waits and he watches. And he's anxious for his son to return. See, the word prodigal, extravagantly spending, it explains the father even more so than it explains the son. Yeah, the son was wasteful with what he got. And just, if you don't know the story of the prodigal son, this boy goes to his father and asks for his inheritance. Kind of a rude thing to do, at least. I won't ask my dad for my inheritance because he'll just give me bills. And I don't need more of those. So. He'll hand me a mortgage for a house in Cody. By the way, if anybody wants to move to Cody, I know a great house for sale. It's got an awesome view, great open living plan, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom upstairs, 2 bedrooms downstairs, a bathroom downstairs. It's awesome. Just let me know if you need it. Sales pitch over. Was that okay? Yeah, that worked. No matter what that son did with his inheritance, it wasn't going to change who he was. So his dad obliged him. He said, okay, here it is. The son went off and just totally wasted it. He was an idiot, basically. And so the story of the lost son is not so much about what he did with what he had been given, but about what the father did. See, because he welcomed the son back. When his son came to his senses, the prodigal father lavishly threw this party, killed the fattened calf, brought everyone in and celebrated the fact that his son was home. And it wasn't some idiot that went and wasted all his money, that dumb guy that feeds the pigs over in the other town. That was my son who's come home. See, the son's behavior didn't change his identity at all. The father's extravagant and wasteful love still called him his son. We have a prodigal father who loves us more than makes sense. He loves us in ways that are too extravagant for us to even fathom. And he calls us his children. You know what? We are what God calls us. Just like that son was still his son. Just like I'm still my dad's son. Because that's what they call us. You are a child of God. Not because you're here today. Not because you've lived your life in the right way. You're a child of God not because you've done all the right religious duties. You're a child of God because that's what God says you are. We are what God calls us. Listen to this from 1 John 3. It says, look how very much our Heavenly Father loves us, for He allows us to be called His children, and we really are. But the people who belong to this world don't know God, so they don't understand that we're his children. Yes, dear friends, we already are God's children, and we can't even imagine what we will be like when Christ returns. But we do know that when he comes, we'll be like him, for we will see him as he really is. And all who believe this will keep themselves pure, just as Christ is pure. See how much our Heavenly Father loves us. He even lets us be called his children. I want to stop and ask a question real quick. How long has it been since you thought about, what do I want to be when I grow up? We get to a point in life where we stop asking that question, right? I'm a banker. I'm a youth minister. I'm a nurse. I'm a teacher. And we stop asking our question because we feel like we've answered our question, right? But I want to challenge you a little bit in that today. What do you want to be when you grow up? I know most of us are already grown up. We've already made those choices. But I want to hold out to you another option to maybe the ones that you've chosen. Even if you've chosen good options, and many of those you don't have to do anything to change. But above anything else that you are, when you grow up, would you be a child of God? That's what he calls you, because he loves you. Would you make that your priority? Would you make that the single most defining thing about you? When you think of who am I? I'm a child of God. See, I think when we think that first, it changes everything else about what we are, what we do. So what does it mean that God calls us his children? This prodigal father who loves us extravagantly, who lavishes his love on us more than we could ever deserve, more than what is rational, more than what we can even imagine. What does it mean to be his child? Well, there's a couple things, and the first one is that our dad can handle it. Whatever it might be. Do you remember ever when you were a kid having the argument, well, my dad can beat up your dad, or my dad makes more money than your dad? My kids always lose that argument. But they say, well, my dad can run faster than your dad, and they might win that one as long as the dad is a little bit older than, yeah. Guys, we have a big dad. And there is no problem that you and I face that he can't handle. There is no issue that we wrestle with that he doesn't have the solution for. There's no difficulty that we face that he can't conquer. What does it mean that our prodigal father calls us his children? It means that we've got a dad that can handle it. So do what he says, even if it doesn't make sense. When I graduated high school, I did a lot of things that didn't make sense to most of the people around me. Like getting married 2 weeks after graduation. For most people, that didn't make sense. What are you doing? My friends thought I was crazy. You're not going to be able to date anybody in college. Well, duh. I wasn't that interested in dating anybody in college. I figured it out before that. Didn't need to mess with that whole mess. I'm so glad that I didn't, because I would have done really dumb things, I'm sure. I went to Bible college instead of accepting scholarships that I had to go to much more prestigious or recognizable colleges. Things that would have got me lots of accolades and pat on the back. That didn't make sense to a lot of people, but I knew that's what God wanted me to do. So I did it. And guess what? God handled it. Being a child of God also means that we'll never be deserted. So we shouldn't be afraid to try new things. Anything is possible. When we have God with us, nothing is out of reach. If you follow Christ, wherever he leads you, there's nothing that's not going to work out. And I'm not telling you that, give your life to Jesus and everything is roses and rainbows and puppy dogs. You know better. It's tough sometimes. But here's what I know. I know that when it gets hard, I'm never alone. I look at some of you and I think of your stories. I think of how you have been deserted by your earthly fathers. And I'm so glad that I've been able to tell some of you and help you understand you have another Father who will never leave you. He will never forsake you. He'll never leave you just off by your own. Well, you got to handle that one on your own. It's your problem. Our Father will never do that to his children. Our Father loves us enough to always be with us in the middle of the mess. That's what Jesus' life was all about. It was about our Father stepping into our mess in every sense. Physically, birth is a messy thing. I remember when I became a father, it freaked me out. We had a long labor and then C-section. I say we, I just kind of stood there. But I remember going into that operating room, and I remember the process of a C-section, and I was standing there, and there was this curtain kind of across Luann, but it wasn't tall enough that I couldn't see, and I'm curious enough that I couldn't not look, and it was years before I could eat out of a metal mixing bowl again, like making cookies and... That's a messy process, I know. It's kind of silly to talk about, kind of goofy. I got that from my dad too. At least that's where I'm going to pass the blame today, because he's here. You know what? Physical birth, that's a mess. And God stepped into that mess so that he could step into your mess and my mess and take the sins that we have committed that just wreck our lives and separate us from him. He stepped into that mess so he could take those with him to the grave. And then he left them there when he came out. And I remember the words that he told his disciples. Go make disciples. It's interesting that he said that right after he says, all authority is given to me. Okay, so do what I say, because I've got the authority. And he says, go make disciples. It's not that difficult to comprehend. Sometimes we don't do a very good job of it. We do a good job of planning church services. We do a good job of getting together and loving each other. We do a pretty good job of taking care of each other. But sometimes we fall short when it comes to actually making disciples, helping other people follow Jesus who are still lost, helping them move from being that wandering sheep that maybe doesn't even know it's lost, to that child who has come home into his father's party who says, welcome home. And he left them with a promise. He said, surely I'll be with you, even to the end of the age. Our Father will never desert us. He's given us His Spirit to live inside of us and to live through us and to reach the world through us. And the last thing I want to share with you is having our Father be God means that there is always hope. See, the best is yet to come, so don't give up. Time will tell. Our Father is going to return. When I started out planning this sermon, I started calling it, and it's in your bulletin, just wait till your dad gets home. How many of you ever heard that phrase? Okay. You have to ask my little brother about that phrase. I never heard it. I don't know what it's all about. They're laughing. Mom. You guys know better, right? Wait till your Father gets home. Can you imagine what it will be like when our Father comes to take us home? Make sure that He doesn't take you alone. Bring people with you. No matter how hopeless a situation seems, know that your Father can handle it and there is hope. The best is yet to come, so don't give up. I learned a lot of these lessons a long time ago. Under this hat. Well, kind of under this hat. And it wasn't because my dad sat me down and preached that sermon to me. It's because I watched him live. See, our kids learn infinitely more from who we are than from what we say. Did you guys catch that? Your kids, and I don't care if you're here and you're 90 years old or you're 22. If your kids are adults, they're still learning from you. If your kids are too little to even talk, they're already learning from you. And they will learn infinitely more from who you are than from what you say. I think I can remember one time growing up when my mom said, "Do as I say, not as I do." And me and my brother were like, "What? Really? I don't think so. If you can do it, I can do it." And we never heard that again, I don't think. Because it doesn't work, does it? We know this. If I'm going to tell you something, I got to do it. If I'm going to tell my kids how to live, I have to live that way. The only way that I know to do that consistently is to make sure that before I'm a youth pastor, before I'm a soccer coach, before I'm driving kids to CIY, before I'm standing on a stage preaching to people, before I'm a husband or a father or anything, that I'm a child of God. Would you be God's children over and above anything else that you are? Beyond anything else that you do, would you please define yourself the way that God does? It's because you are who God says you are. And right here in 1 John 3, He calls you His child. So please be His child. Live the pure life that He calls us to. And I know I didn't define that. We don't have enough time to go into all of that. I promise I won't. The students here are going, "Yeah, right, he's going to keep going." Come on. I'm not, I promise. That's right. Our Father has this. Whatever problems you're facing right now, our Dad's got it. He can handle it. So let Him be who He is, and you be who He says you are. His child, who He loves. I just want to ask you to pray with me, and we'll dismiss. Father, your love goes beyond what we can understand, and so sometimes we don't even know how to respond to it. We run away from you, we hide from you, even though we know that we can't hide. We know you'll find us. God, I just pray that we would allow you to soak into our lives so deeply that people can see you when they look at us. Just like when people look at my kids, they say, oh, you look like your dad. God, I pray that we would look like you. God, may the world see you living through your church. It's in your son's name that we pray.